Good day. My name is Ryan Daniels, and today I'm portraying the colonial schoolmaster Ebenezer Parsons. And we're here at the Braintree's historic Thayer House, celebrating Braintree Day, or Heritage Day. Sorry, not Braintree Day. And we are all portraying different historical personas from Braintree at that time, Massachusetts Bay Colony. And it's an important holiday for Braintree as it celebrates its history, many different aspects of its life, and also just the beautiful colonial architecture and the famous people who came out of Braintree. So we've been here all day. I've been portraying what school teaching was like in the 18th century. So I've had children sit in my classroom and read from horn books and recite lessons from centuries-old primers. Other groups have been portraying how to roast coffee beans and make tea from the Native Americans. And yet another colonial person was here showing an apple press, and they're making fresh apple cider, as well as bread and butter and a tavern demonstration. So all these things culminate to just give a picture of what life was like or similar to in 250 years ago in Braintree.
My name is Chris Hurley. I'm a reenactor from Woburn, Mass, and I'm here in Braintree at the Sylvester Thayer House. My wife is also here, and she has been talking about taverns in the 1770s. And what I've been doing is I've been making cider. And alcoholic cider, hard cider, was a very common drink in the 1770s and actually all throughout the colonial era and through the 1800s as well. Apples grew everywhere in New England. When the colonists came over, there were crab apples, but the colonists also brought with them, they brought scion wood, and they grafted on apple varieties that were common in England to New England trees. But apple seeds don't really care too much about, what their parents were. Each seed is so genetically distinct that each apple tree that grows from it is unique. And so what you wind up with in New England are many, many varieties of apples that have no name. So by the 1770s, most of the orchards on the farms were filled with apple trees that had that didn't have names, but the farmers knew the characteristics. They knew if they made large apples or sweet apples or tart apples or acidic apples. And what makes for a really good cider, a good hard cider, is a variety of all these things. Some sweetness, some bitterness, some acidity, and the tannins, which also make for a good wine as well. Anyway, so if you have a farm in the 1770s in Massachusetts, and most everyone who lived in Massachusetts then was on a farm, you had apple trees. If you had a large farm, you probably had an orchard. If you had a very large orchard, you'd be making lots of cider and fermenting it in a cool basement of your house or a basement of a barn, because it turns out that the alcoholic fermentations done in a cool environment create a better tasting cider. But if you had lots and lots of casks of cider, more than your family could drink in a year, then probably you'd trade it with other farmers who had something you needed, or you'd sell it to a local tavern. Now we're in Braintree today. If you had perhaps 15 or 20 casks of cider, more than you needed, you might cart it all the way into Boston, where you might be able to get 50% more for your cider there. It would be worth the trip. But anyway, how is cider made? It's hard to press juice out of a whole apple. You need to make small pieces, and that's as true in the 21st century as it is in my century, the 1770s. So even with your advantage of pneumatic jacks, hydraulic equipment, or electricity, it's still hard to get juice out of a whole apple. So first you make small pieces. You either chop, grind it. Today I was smashing apples with the table leg in this big bucket. And then once I have the small pieces, then it's for the second step. You press the juice out. And today I was using a typical rack and cloth press that was very much in use during the 19th century, and very similar to what was used in the 18th century in my time. And now this is a small scale version. It's maybe 1/4 or 1/5 the size of an actual cider press. and you wrap up the pieces. In this case, I was using linen cloth. You wrap them up in cloth and create a number of small, thin layers. And once you have that, then you it's in the press. You apply the screws of the press, and then you express the juice out into a waiting bucket. So making apple cider would be something that would keep a farmer busy for many days on end for a few weeks late in the fall. Most of the apples that were made for cider ripened in October. And so it was not an early season activity. It was more of a late fall activity. And not all the apples went into making cider. Some of the apples were good keepers and would stay in the basement to January, February, and you could eat them or bake with them then. And some of the apples were cut up and hung up to dry, and the dried apples then could be reconstituted and used later as well. Now, another use of the apples was the byproduct. The byproduct, after you've squeezed out all the juice, you're left with the stems, the cores, the seeds, the skin, the hard parts of the apple that aren't juicy. That could be fed to the animals. And by feeding it to the animals, you could fatten your hogs and help your chickens grow. And later on in the winter, you could enjoy your bacon and eggs, thanks to your apple orchard. Also, some of the cider you make. Now, some of the cider, once you've made it into alcohol, if you leave it exposed to air, it will turn into vinegar. And vinegar is very useful on the farm. You can, with a dampened cloth and vinegar, you can clean a kitchen table and it will help sanitize it. If you have lots of vinegar, you can pour it in a crock, and in springtime, you can pour it, oh, there goes that, never mind. If you have your asparagus or your beans later on, or any other vegetable that is amenable to being pickled by vinegar, you can put it in the crock with the vinegar, and then that will keep. And you'll be very happy to have that in the coming winter when other food may be scarce. And so the apple was very important in New England. It helped make cider, which would be drunk year-round on the farm. It could be a trade item to help with your finances if you could sell it elsewhere. The apple byproduct would go to feed the animals, and the apple cider vinegar was also useful as well. And I thank you very much for staying here today and learning about the apples of New England and what they were used for.
Yes, so this is a 1763 Charleville musket, or a replica of one. It is a flintlock musket, so called because this is a piece of flint and this is a lock. Now, some of the terms that were from the 18th century have lived on today in New England. Someone may have heard of lock, stock, and barrel. And as I mentioned, this is the lock, this is the stock, and this is the barrel. So that's where that term comes from. The way that this device works is this piece of flint, when struck against steel, will create a spark. I don't know if you can see it here. So that spark will drop into the pan, which will ignite a small amount of black powder in the pan, which will in turn ignite the main charge, which, if you can see that, there's a tiny hole there. There should be a charge of powder in here with a ball on top. So the way that it worked is, my commander would say, prime and load. I'd bring it down here, open it, rip open a charge, put a little bit of black powder here, put the rest of the powder in here, put the ball on top, and then drive the ball all the way in. So now, like a cannon, I am loaded with a lead ball on top of a pile of black powder. And then he would say, make ready. I would go to the ready position and then present and fire.
So the games that we have here are Nine Man's Morris, which is a strategy game where you're trying to take all of your enemy's pieces. We have Cribbage, which is a well-known game that has lasted through the centuries. I believe I remember hearing that it was a medieval game. What this young gentleman just won here was Shut the Box, which is a very simple addition game. And the game design is that you're trying to shut the box, which involves rolling the dice and flipping tiles equivalent down. There's a bit more strategy, but since you don't have much time, there are plenty of dice games. We have a whole book here that's all dice games if you want to see that. And as you can see, we use very simple pieces for these because they're very simple physical games, though often the rules are very complex and hard to remember. So that's how we know them. We have written accounts because they're hard to remember.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to 3 C's Tavern. I'm the wife of the tavern keeper, and before you see some of the items that I would have in my tavern. For instance, of course, I'd have tankards to serve you some drinks. I would be making some food, serving you with this. This is an example of a fork that you would see in 1775, a two-tine fork, which would be used only to hold your food in place while you cut it. They did not use a fork to lift the food to their mouth. We would have had a number of candles going at night so that it was bright enough for people to be able to read the newspaper, be a lot brighter than your house. So this was one of the draws to a tavern. And I would have been keeping some of my spirits, particularly rum, in a jug like this, and my cider, which we now call hard cider. So cider in a cask like this. And I would have made a lot of punch, and I would have made it according to the recipe of this little poem. 1 part sour, 2 parts sweet, 3 parts strong, 4 parts weak. So I would have used, for the 1 part, I would have used these expensive imported citrus fruits. I have some oranges, lemons, and limes here. The 2 parts sweet would have also been expensive imported sugar, or I might have used molasses or even honey for a sweetener. 3 parts strong would have been the rum, and 4 parts weak might have been water or ale. Ale in those days was less lower alcohol by volume than we're familiar with today. And on this other side here, over here, I have a recipe that you might want to catch for one of the most popular cocktails and first cocktails of the colonies called Flip, which is made with ale, dark rum, molasses, and an egg. As a tavern keeper, knowing that many people would be ordering this, I'd have a special kind of a flagon that I'd make up, a dozen portions of it, put the ingredients in, and then I would have something called a loggerhead, which is a metal rod with a ball on the end that you'd keep in the fire and keep it there until the ball was red with heat. And then you would put that loggerhead into the flagon, and the drink would foam up and be nice and warm, and I'd apportion it out. And you can just imagine, not only was it delicious, but nice and warming on a cold winter's night, and nutritious as well. So there's a little window on what we have here at 3 C's Tavern. Thank you for stopping by.
So today we're here at the Fair House Heritage Day Festival, and we are displaying alternatives to East India Company tea. Once there was the boycott against British tea, households needed to find alternatives to drink. And we have coffee. We've been roasting coffee today. We have the green beans that we've roasted. And this is the roast, And we did brew some coffee today. We're out right now, so I can't show you that. We also turned to herbs, and we relied heavily on the indigenous people to help us choose the right herbs. Some of it came from Europe with the settlers, but a lot of it was native. This one in particular, slippery elm bark, it smells like maple oatmeal, and it's really good to soothe a sore throat or a bad digestion. We have chamomile here, which is great for calming. We have mint, which is nice for an upset tummy as well, energizing. We have marshmallow, another herb that is marshmallow root. And that's another herb that's really good for soothing a sore throat. We have lemon balm, which is great to calm a nervous person. We have lavender, help us go to sleep. and be calm. Lots of calming herbs here, but they're all tasty and they can all be brewed into tea separately or together to make a different flavor. But it was very important to the colonists that they find these alternatives, and this is sassafras root, which we make root beer from, and you chop up the root and it's stewed into a tea. You can ferment it, you can add yeast to it, it will become carbonated, and it's a sassafras, well, root beer, the actual beer. Sassafras tea turns into that. And here I have the shell of the cocoa plant, the cocoa bean. So it's cacao tea. Earlier I blended a little chamomile with some cacao beans for a little bit of chocolate chamomile tea. It was delicious.
So the dead men are if you were a number of men sitting around a table drinking wine, as an example, and you finished the bottle, you would throw it under the table, and they would refer to that sometimes as a dead man or a dead soldier. And if you got so drunk that you slid off your chair and went under the table, you are down among the dead men. So that's what we're going to sing about right now. So let me tell you how the chorus goes. Down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let them lie. Okay, so that's how the chorus goes. And see how well you can follow me on the verse. Here's a, try having a tanker. We can play that one if you want to. Okay, so here's a, grab a tanker. Here's a health to the king and a lasting peace, to faction and into wealth increase. Come, let us drink it while we have breath, for there's no drinking after death. And he that will his health deny, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let him lie. In smiling Bacchus' joys I'll roll, deny no pleasure to my soul. Let Bacchus' health round bristly move, for there is a friend to love. And they that would his health deny, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down. Down among the dead men, let them lie. May love and wine their rights maintain, and their united pleasures reign, while Bacchus' treasure frowns aboard, losing the joy that both afford. And they that all with us comply, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let them lie. Huzzah! Everybody clink. Okay. To your help. Huzzah! Okay. Thank you for joining me on that song.